Hey everyone, my name's Tom Froese. Welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking to a friend about starting from zero as an illustrator. I'll properly introduce my guest, Dan Cumberland, in a bit, but I just want to say thank you for watching. And of course, if you like this video, give it a big like and don't forget to subscribe, hit that little bell button. You know the deal. Doing that is the best way to make sure these videos get seen. And of course, when people actually show a like or some kind of interaction, such as a comment with the videos, it means a lot to me personally. It encourages me. It lets me know that you guys are watching. And of course, I always like knowing how my videos are helping you and that kind of thing. So thank you very much for watching. So one thing about this particular recording is I tried to do all the intro to the video and set up the whole conversation with Dan kind of live with Dan. And I was hoping I could just do that in one take and be done with it. I wasn't really happy with how it went. You'll notice I'm a little bit almost nervous at the beginning of the video. And I think I was just putting a lot of pressure on myself to do everything in one take. And I think the more I do this, the more I realize I'm just not a one take person. I just take it takes me a few tries, and I just need to embrace that and accept it. And so the same thing happened at the end of the video. I tried to close off and sign off and say, like, keep doing whatever I say to keep doing at the end of the video, you know, that little sign off outro type thing. And I couldn't remember it. And we were joking around about it in the video. Just keep doing stuff. You don't have to listen to me. Don't do what I'm telling you to do. But ultimately, I felt like I just didn't like it. So I'll be tacking onto this video at the end, just me here, just wrapping things up. So I'll see you there. Enjoy the conversation. Okay, so let's get into it. My guest today is Dan Cumberland. He's the host of the Meaning Movement podcast, where he's interviewed such folks as Andy J. Miller of the Creative Pep Talk podcast, and Todd Henry, author of the Accidental Creative podcast and or author of that book and the podcast by the same name. We also had a great chat on Dan's podcast a few years ago, and I encourage you to check out that podcast and check out our conversation. I think that was back in 2018. So Dan wears many hats. Alongside his podcast, he works with people to help them find their place and their work in the world. He's also a photographer at Sparkfly Photography, which is a company he and his wife Stacia run together. Today, Dan and I will be talking about adding one more hat to his collection, the illustration hat. So to start, I'll just have Dan maybe introduce himself a bit more, and then from there, I'm going to hand things over to Dan, who has some really great questions about starting from zero as an illustrator. So Dan, why don't I just hand it over to you just to maybe fill in anything that I might have missed there, kind of give a little background, and then I'm going to hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun. Hey, everybody watching. Thanks for tuning in. I think that was a great intro. I do wear many hats. I am a little bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. And especially coming into this conversation, apparently I want to add more skills to my. I don't know. I guess I like trying things. I like experimenting. I like learning new things, and that's some of what brings me into this this conversation. So I think Tom covered a lot of what I do. I also have a small software company that I run, and a few other online things. But I think that, Tom, your intro is solid, so thank you. So I reached out. Tom and I go back a few years, and love your work, Tom, and love your voice in education and as far as teaching illustrators where to start. I kind of felt a little bit timid and shy, I guess, asking the question, because it is such a baseline question without as much homework as I often approach things. My learning process, when there's a new skill I want to learn or something that I want to take on, is to usually go to the library, I check out all the books, or at least scroll through all the books on the topic, choose one or two that I feel like might be the best ones, and then I read those before I even venture in and start. Remember when my wife and I got a dog, right not long after we got married ages ago. The first thing I did, probably I think even before we got the dog, as we were thinking about getting a dog, was like I learned all about dog training. Like felt like I was a master, at least conceptually, of dog training. So that's my typical learning, I guess, method. When it comes to drawing, I have a 5-year-old son. I end up drawing often with him. Something I like to encourage in him, just as just as such a great avenue for expression and hand-eye coordination and just fun and silliness and all those kinds of things. So we'll like get some construction paper or butcher paper, just like cover our table and just draw around all kinds of things. And so it's gotten me thinking more about my drawing, feeling more frustrated times when I'm trying to draw something specific and it doesn't look very good. And I've had a long-standing desire to improve my drawing, but when I follow the typical method, I go to the library, look at all the books. I've looked at courses at our community college. It's all very much like life skill based, which isn't what not life skill, but life form. Like there's probably a better name for this, but
life drawing or drawing from real life.
Yeah. Which is just not very interesting to me. I'm more interested in a more illustrative, cartooning, fun, imaginative approach. Like I want something to be recognizable, but it doesn't have to look like the actual thing. I said, in my email to you, I said, I guess the question was like, if I want to draw SpongeBob, do I need to learn how to draw a sponge first?
Right.
And so, I guess the starting point is, I'm curious about your thoughts on what is the best. Where should I be looking for resources? Where, like, going from other than just small figures and making it up as I go along, like what's the path from here to improvement? And I think that's, I guess, the trajectory of this whole conversation.
Right.
But where should we start?
Yeah. Well, in your question about like, do you have to learn how to draw realistically from life in order to learn drawing? I think a lot of that stuff is very close to my heart in terms of being an illustrator. And a lot of what I teach is based on the fact that you don't have to draw realistically, representationally as an illustrator. Like my whole thing is actually like not that. It's drawing more symbolically, and a lot of this is what I would call stylization, right? Mm-hmm. So you, in another word I like to use is abstraction. So imagine you're drawing something in front of you. It could be like a mug of coffee. It could be your hand. You're trying to draw your hand. Of course, the most natural thing to want to do is to draw that almost photographically. You want to record objectively and as precisely as possible. So that's one way of drawing. The other way of drawing would be more just symbolically. And that would be just like, if you're drawing your hand, you're going to end up probably just drawing a few sausages connected to some kind of appendage. And, depending on whether you want it to, like, I think what you're experiencing is there's a space between that, a space between drawing the sausage fingers and drawing the more photorealistic hand, the realism, right? Yes. And there's no one better way or another. I know what I like in my own commercial art, and I know what the goals of my art are. It's not to record history. It's not to record a scientific reality. For me, it's about representing an idea, the idea of the hand. In that case, I could draw the hand in 1,000 different ways. And what matters more is that it's doing its job. It's symbolically representing the hand, and also has those layers of say, maybe it needs to just have a certain whimsy to it, or have a certain fun to it, right? There's lots of things in there. Of course, these are all kind of I'm opening a whole can of worms here. Yeah, but I think the general trajectory is, in my opinion, learning to draw from life is good. So step one, just learn to draw. So that means do go to the library, do get those books that teach you how to do life drawing. Go to a class at community college, take that continuing education class or whatever it is. That's a good skill to have. I guess my question for you is, do you feel like you can draw to sort of like, it's not like you're Rembrandt or something like that, but like, do you feel like you can draw?
I feel like sometimes is the answer. Like, so there are some things when I try to draw an animal or whatever, particularly again with my son, that's where I draw the most, where I like draw it and I'm like, that looks very much like a dog. And then there's other times that I'm like, that doesn't at all. That looks more like a potato than a dog.
Right.
And so, but still, like, I feel like most of that drawing exists if we have a spectrum of like, photorealist to like abstract, symbolic, that I'm maybe somewhere in the middle, more towards the illustrative and symbolic, side of that. And I think that where I feel like there are some things, and this might just be a matter of practice. There's some like I draw fish a lot. I took a cartooning class when I was like 10 years old, and they taught me a specific way to draw a fish, and I'm really good at drawing that fish or small variations of that fish.
Okay.
There's a few other things like that. That's like, I could draw this one thing, small variations on that. But then if there's, say, an animal or I don't know, a vehicle or like something that's like, I haven't tried that before. It's wildly. It feels like there's a wild variance of how successful or unsuccessful, I feel like the end product is, and it's most satisfying when it feels. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it feels closer to, I guess, what I thought it would look like before I started. And when you start putting the in my case, it's typically black crayon that I like to use, black crayon to paper, and the end result doesn't feel like, it feels like there's, I guess, a lot of variance between that and what I thought I was trying to draw. Right. Like that, it can be really frustrating and discouraging. So it's a very long way of answering the question of like, there are some, if you ask me, like, do I feel like I can draw certain things? The answer is yes. Other things, I would say not at all.
Right. Yeah. And there's no right answer to that, right? Like, how you draw is how you draw. And my whole thing is like, I want anyone at any level of drawing ability who has more of like a mind for illustration. I don't consider myself a drawing teacher. I'm an illustration teacher. I think the two are separate, right? So, I mean, they're definitely related, but when you're illustrating it's a more creative act. You're doing kind of what I think you're saying is like you want to create a car or create a dog that looks not necessarily realistic. It's like the idea of that car or that dog in that has some added value to it, some visual added value or symbolic value. So, I mean, that's the one thought. So I guess the question is like, what's your trajectory or your teleos for wanting to draw? Like what is do you want to become a professional illustrator? Or do you want to impress your son? Like what's your big goal?
I mean, impress my son, yes, definitely. Like, but I mean, that's not the main goal.
It's a good goal. I get that.
It's a great goal. Yeah. I think I don't want to be a commercial illustrator as, but I do see that there are some ways where like I could imagine some really nice intersection of if I was better at illustrating and pairing it with photography or adding hand drawn things to our to one of my websites or something like that, where it's like if I was more skilled, I could kind of sprinkle in some of this into other work that I do. But that also just feels like secondary. I think that my primary goal is just to have fun with it, but also like to improve just as a like from a sense of like accomplishment and like feeling like I am improving, I am getting better, to be able to see like, oh wow, I am much better at drawing dogs now than I was a year ago,
Right.
or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So I think to some degree, just from like a self-improvement standpoint.
Yeah, and that's an important thing to bring up is like I just had this range of basically like something very personal and private, which it might be like impressing your son, all the way to like the most extreme version is making money from it. And definitely like those aren't the only options. Within there is just doing it because you love it. And you and I are both runners, right? Like we both have goals that we're setting in running, whether it's trying to get a time or a certain amount of miles a week. If I was about to say kilometers, but
those two.
so I think within that, your goal probably isn't to run professionally or join the Olympic team, right? But it's still important. And so I'm by that I'm just sensing like for me the importance of illustrating is like that's in my living. That's my goal. So it's important for me at a different level, I guess. And so but for running and for us it's just important. And same with, so for you, like getting better at drawing is just important, like because it's enjoyable. You want to see yourself improve, and that's great. So it's important to know like what your goal is, because then like I mean I would just have to fine tune my answers to like some of your questions accordingly. And of course I'd have to emphasize certain things more if you did want to become a professional illustrator, then of course I need to give you kind of a path to that, or at least like talk about what a path could look like. So I think for anyone though, even if you're, regardless of where you sit on that spectrum, there is you talking about wanting to draw that car, that dog, from your imagination, basically. That's the skill set. And in terms of its value to you, you talked about pairing it with your illustration. You want it to become a more useful tool to some degree. You're not set on it becoming your livelihood or basing your identity on it, but it could become a useful tool. So to that extent, and I would say in what you're describing, I think, is having a vocabulary or a repertoire in your head of things to draw. You're maybe sitting down with your son, and you're like, okay, let's draw a race car, or let's draw like a race, like a whole like track, like. Where do you even start? Like, what does the track look like? What do the cars look like? What do the drivers look like? What are their helmets? Where does the engine go? What do the wheels look like? So you start thinking about all these things. And what it comes down to is having a repertoire of things that you can draw from. What most people have to do is go to Google and look online, gather their references, and then somehow draw from those, but create something new from those. And this, I'm actually describing like a part of my journey where I thought that's what I had to do as an illustrator, is to go and like, I don't have all these things in my imagination. I'm not like, I thought that was a defect of mine, as like I'm kind of like an imposter or a hack, because I don't have that ability. I imagine in my imagination some illustrators can just like they just like, you've seen some, especially ones who do more comic type illustration, they're able to like just like build up like a superhero and all their proportions and the like the three-dimensionality of them.
Yes.
And if you can't do that, it feels very much like you're like, you don't, that's like an unobtainable skill that you definitely don't have. And in my experience, most people don't have that ability, and we do have to go through a certain amount of drawing from references. So we have to go to Google and we have to draw race cars from life, and then in my own and I teach a whole drawing class called Drawing Toward Illustration on Skillshare, which basically it divides the illustration process into two general stages. So you have what I call observational mode sketching, where you're doing that. You're getting just like looking for pictures of race cars and then drawing them just from pictures. It's not creative. Yeah. It's just sort of like interpreting what you see and putting it on paper. Your only goal there is, while you're drawing, you're observing. You're I like to use the word downloading information about what a race car looks like. And you might actually have 4 or 5 different pictures of different cars. And then what happens is you just build a composite of information in your head, and then you put that away when you're done. You draw as long as you want till you're exhausted or you feel like you've done enough, put it away. Next is you go into what I call ideational mode sketching. This is where the creative part happens. So you now just start sketching out your car. And the exercise is one of, at first, of quantity. So you're just like, you might suck at it a few times. But the important thing in ideational or I mode drawing is that you're not trying to replicate the realistic drawing of the car. Now you're sort of just drawing a car from memory. And there's going to be a period of time when you're very uncomfortable with what comes out, even after. So you've done more, having done more research, you will be more confident. So having done observational mode sketching, you will be more confident drawing a race car in general. You will remember more parts and you will have something more than you would have otherwise. So that's good. But in the process of growing and developing, you'll also find that it will feel awkward. You won't be comfortable with what's coming out of your hand because it doesn't look realistic, especially as an adult. If you're over the age of 8 or 9 years old, you're going to be very critical about what comes out of your hand, because and that's why a lot of this is something I've read somewhere, but like I don't think I'm making this up, but I think a lot of kids around the age of 8 or 9 stop drawing, and those who do keep drawing are the ones who've kind of figured out how to draw realistically. They kind of have something that allows them to do that. The other kids who don't see realism coming out of their drawing, they are like, they just give it up and get into sports or whatever it is.
Feel discouraged.
Yeah. And so it's just like, we have this expectation to draw realistically. So there are actually ways to continue to draw more realistically once you come up against that wall. And but that's a different thing in my opinion, because we're talking about drawing from imagination, not drawing from like ultimately, right? Like once you put away your pictures, you've drawn from your pictures. It's like how does Dan draw a race car? What's Dan's race car look like? And it will probably look just, if you won't really know how to.
Just had to sneeze. Sorry.
That's all right. Nice mute. Did you mute that? I didn't hear it at all.
I did.
That was so professional.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you won't really know how to measure what you've done until you've done that with other things. You'll maybe draw, and maybe this is kind of where I would end up. I mean, this goes beyond this question, but what I would say is like, you need to draw every day in order to really feel like you're growing. And while you're doing that, which is coming back to my main point here, is that when you draw your hand, a race car, a dog, I don't know, a camping truck, I don't know, whatever it is, a tree,
Yep.
then you start building up a sense of like, oh, I see a through line in all of these. There's a certain way that I do all of these. You'll probably see it through your fish, right? Like you have the fish that you know to draw realistically, and you know how to riff on that a bit. And within that, you have this, your style basically starts to come out.
Yeah.
And style is different. Having a stylized way of drawing is different than just drawing from observation.
Yeah, and I think that's what I want, is to have a style. I think that's a great way to think of it. How much is style development intentional, and how much of it is just you don't really know what that's going to look like? I don't know what Dan's drawing style is going to be until Dan draws enough to have a style.
Right. So how much of it is like your intention, and how is it accidental? There's no like ratio that I know of. I think it's just, I mean, first of all, you don't want style to be your focus, right? It's more something that you observe happening. So at first it is, I think, accidental. So style is kind of what, I mean, this is kind of a thing that I've said before, I think, where style isn't what you can draw, but what you can't draw. Or it's not how you can draw, it's how you can't draw. So you draw that race car from observation, then you're going to draw it kind of realistically. You're going to put that away. Then you're going to go and draw it again. You're going to forget a lot of the details, but you're going to draw it anyway. Your style or clues to your style exist in what you forgot and how you made up for what you forgot.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the other part of style is your ability to recognize those parts of your limitations that you can actually turn into strengths. You're turning your limitations into repeatable mannerisms that are yours. And so you can't just set out one day and say, I'm going to have a style. I'm going to have the Dan style, and then kind of draw things a certain way. You might, but I don't think it will be satisfying, because it won't be the result of this natural, like coming up against like, oh, I don't like how this looks. I can't draw things this like as realistically as I want. But then kind of seeing it in retrospect somehow with a little bit more experience or some other kind of measuring stick, and you'd be like, oh, I kind of see something happening here. I kind of like what's happening there. I'm going to lean into that more. I always draw these wobbly lines. I'm going to use those wobbly lines for these other things too. And then you start kind of, it's like a bit of feedback that you start getting from yourself when you're up close working, then you stand back and you look at what you made, and you have that near and far perspective, and you always just recalibrate your style based on what you're observing.
Yeah, I love that. So I heard you say, like, draw every day. And I think that one of the things that I find myself craving is like the step-by-step method of like, here's your exercise for today. Here's your thing to do today. Are there places I could look for that kind of guidance, or is it just like, just draw?
Well, I'm glad you've asked, because, in a very self-serving way, in a very self-serving way, I do teach my own approaches to these things. So, in all honesty, my class drawing toward illustration would be helpful for someone in your position, just looking for a guided way of drawing. and something maybe alternative to life drawing.
Yeah.
So it is a commitment. It is like the project's ambitious and stuff like that. But I still think, I mean, if you want to learn more about these ideas of observational and ideational drawing, that's where I go really into it.
Awesome.
Another thing, so you're asking specifically about guided, some kind of, you had actually, I like how you worded it. You said, I like having directions and exercises. I like being told to try this next, knowing that it's taking me toward my destination, but saving me the time and effort of deciding what I need to do next. Where should I go for direction? So I thought that was a great question. And I think, first of all, I mean, a great acknowledgement of being told what to do, like guided, like being given very specific directions. I think a lot of people think if I'm creative, I should be able to just make it up as I go along. So I think key to learning is learning from other people and, quite frankly, imitating their methodology, if not their actual, like, what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because you'll learn some skills and you'll adopt them as your own in some more original way later.
Yeah.
So like I use my own class as an example, but go like Skillshare, for instance, is a great resource, and I'm not saying this as from any point of bias or whatever. Like I think Skillshare just has a lot of different step-by-step classes that do. So let's just say you want to learn how to draw faces on people. You can go and probably find a class about that on Skillshare.
Yeah, awesome.
And then it's up to you to determine whether that teacher is teaching it in the step-by-step way that you hope. But spend time with classes, I think. If you want more on the observational drawing part of things, I can't recommend this book enough. It's called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
And she is like that book revolutionized drawing for me. And the premise of the book is basically, it's a bit like, it's based on kind of outdated science of like left versus right brain. I don't know what the new science is fully, but the model works still. It still holds up. The idea is like your left brain is reason and logic oriented. And so when you go to draw, most of us are left brain dominant, and especially adults. When we try to draw our hand, we go right past what we're seeing and we go right to the symbol in our head for hand, which is when we get these awkward, clumsy sausage fingers, which may work for stylized illustration, but not so much if you want to draw from life. If you want to draw the dog, you might have a potato symbol in your head, and that's why you keep drawing potato dogs, right? Whereas she teaches, like, if we can get into this zone in our right brain, which is more spatially oriented, it's the same part of our brain that when you're driving, and then you realize an hour later on the freeway that you've been driving, but you haven't been like. But like part of some part of you has been driving, but you weren't. Totally. Like your left brain. So she says that's your right brain, and there is this mode shift in your. It's a very meditative feeling, and that's like when I'm drawing. When I get into that zone, it's like the critic switches off, and I'm seeing in a very intense and clear way. And so, in that sense, drawing. It becomes more of it's a way of seeing, and then along the way, you're actually drawing what's in front of you, and you're not drawing the symbol for whatever it is that you're because your so-called left brain wants to take shortcuts, and the shortest cut to those things is the symbol.
Yeah.
As an illustrator, I want symbols.
Yeah.
Not only because it's more unique, and it's almost like my brand. It's like the way I do things. It's also efficient. Like I have a way of expressing ideas that are a little bit more canned, if you will. That doesn't make them less special. It's just, that is one of the big differences. Yeah. So the book, I was talking about your step-by-step though. How to learn step-by-step. So Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain does give nice exercises that kind of lead you into that mindset. So that's another one. But I would just say, like, if you're really serious about having directions exercises, it's about taking a class of some kind, whether that's online or in person, when that's an option.
Yeah, I love it. I know as I've looked through what's available, particularly at our public library, I keep coming up against this, like, very realistic, like, and that's some of why I reached out. But I was going to say, one of the books that I found to be really, really fun, mostly for my son to engage with. I'm sure, I feel like you may have even mentioned it at some point. It's Ed. What was his name?
Emberley.
Yes. His books are phenomenal. And I'm so surprised that there aren't more resources like that out there that are, it just seemed, and his books, for, I guess, people watching who aren't familiar, but it's like, like every page will have like 10 different little, like, here, so you can draw a little car or a little truck or a little ambulance or a little, like all these, like, it is super basic little shapes. And my son will just literally go through and draw every single one. And I've been trying to invite my son to like, let's make a whole, not just draw each little car, but let's draw a highway going through a town, and, like, kind of put all the pieces together. He's not quite there yet, but I've been really surprised at how that there aren't more resources like that out there that are more on the illustrative and imaginative, and, like, just kind of give you a direction to go and kind of let you go there. And I'm curious about your thoughts about why that may or may not be.
Yeah, I think those must exist. I don't personally have a catalog in mind of what's out there today. I do know about Ed Emberley's style of teaching drawing, which is very accessible. It's very, like, make a thumbprint and then draw, like, turn your thumbprints into different animals at the zoo, right? Yes, and so exactly. I think that's definitely a really fun one. It does depend, though. Like, we have an Ed Emberley book in the house. Our kids have seen it. It's like it doesn't exist. Like, they're not drawn to it. Our girls don't want direction. They just they want to be able to draw. I shouldn't say they don't want direction, but I think they're very picky about. They're selective about it. Sure. And maybe they don't like my retro sensibility that Ed Emberley books have, right?
Yeah.
They actually really like the cute style with, like, the big eyes and the reflections. And to me, I find that it's disappointing because I don't like it, but but it's what they like. And so all their drawings are just like this lovely drawing that they make kind of from heart, and then they add on these big alien eyes with reflections on them. They better not watch this podcast. It'll ruin them forever. I'm a terrible father. But I mean, they're good like they're so imaginative, right? And they just kind of go free. But I've tried giving them, like, cartooning books, like, here's how to draw, people. And it's like, you draw the faint lines at first, the ball and the stick and then the square or whatever. I don't know about you. When I was a kid, that didn't make sense to me. I didn't want to draw the stick and the ball and the, like, thing. I went, like, right to, like, the darkest line possible, like, drawing the end result, just from the end result. Totally. And most of the time it worked out fine. So I guess all this to say, I guess as adults, we're probably more poised to follow those kinds of directions. And I think there's a lot, if you really want to learn how to draw your own, like, you use the SpongeBob SquarePants kind of.
Yeah.
I don't think you actually literally want to just redraw
No.
that character.
No.
What you want to do is to be able to create characters on your own
Yeah.
based on some imaginary basis.
Yes.
And maybe what you're getting is like, what's the underlying structure of those, or where does information or ideation behind those things come from?
Yep.
And so learning how to cartoon like that with those basic shapes, I mean, that's part of it, right? Depending on the kind of illustration you want to do, learning how to develop those underlying shapes is actually part of learning.
Yeah.
And in that sense, maybe learning to draw like that will mean taking a cartooning class or an animation class, like illustration for animation class.
Yeah.
I had a friend who she went to art school, fantastic drawer. Like she's just like one of the best drawers I know. And then she went to a whole other school to learn how to do animation. Like it was called, I think it was called Max the Mutt. It's a funny name. It's a Toronto-based animation school. And then she learned how to draw in a specific like animating cartoon comic kind of style. So another person that comes to mind that teaches these things actually, I think you can tune in to his live videos still on Adobe's YouTube channel. His name's Kyle T. Webster.
Okay.
And so he's famous in the illustration world for making a lot of realistic looking Photoshop brushes, like brushes you can use to like recreate like traditional media in Photoshop.
Yeah.
But he teaches, since the pandemic started, he's been doing, it's called Draw with Kyle. For when my kids were pulled out of school last year, for our art class, we went and just tuned in on, I can't remember how frequently it was, but yeah, we were drawing with him, and he would just like draw a line, and then eventually we'd see what we were drawing. Like it kind of, like we didn't know what we were drawing until it was done. So there are people like that you can follow and pick up just some methodologies for building up these characters.
Yep. I love it. Yeah, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were watching some of Mo Willems was doing some sort of YouTube thing, and we're doing some follow-alongs of his pigeon on the don't let the pigeon drive the bus or whatever his books are, which is super fun and good kind of follow-along guidance, which I appreciate. But it sounds like I guess the challenge ahead of me is to build up my cognitive catalog of shapes and different ways of going about tackling the obstacle of drawing this or that object or thing, which as you were kind of talking about that, it reminded me of I was with my brother the other day, and he held, I have a 8-month-old daughter who's putting a lot of things in her mouth, and he said, I forget what he had, but I think he had his cell phone. He's like, "Hey Dan, do you know? Can you imagine what this would feel like if you put your tongue on it?" Which I thought was a really funny question to ask. And I was like, "Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine what your cell phone would feel like if I licked it." And he's like, "That's what your daughter's doing." And he said he started like pointing around the room. He's like, "Can you imagine what that would feel like if you put your tongue on it?" And I was like, yes, actually. And it's kind of like this weird experience of like, yeah, I can actually imagine most of what I see. I could imagine what it would feel like to put my tongue on it. But the way that your brain develops that is as babies, that's some of what's happening when they're putting their tongue on, putting everything in their mouth, is like learning those textures. And that's, I feel like that just
so
came to mind as you're talking about this, is like that's I guess what I need to do is develop that catalog of how it how you draw all of the things or many of them, and then
mentally put your mouth around things.
Yes, yes. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I thought that was a really interesting parallel.
No, I don't know. This is definitely taking a tangent, but my youngest daughter, she she's like, I'm gonna embarrass her, but she's 7 years old and she's still like very like oral fixation. I don't know why,
Uh-huh.
but
Yeah.
the when she was younger, she would just put like, why would you do that? We found her with snails in her mouth, like entire snails. Um, the most memorable moment though was we were in a cafe and they had a real live cactus about that tall, just like big old cactus, and she goes like this, just like just licks the cactus, and we that was the end of our time at the cafe.
Yeah. Wow.
So
That's so funny.
anyway, yeah,
Um,
it's I love it. I love your friend's analysis of the
yeah.
situation. Just that
Yeah.
was so good.
Yeah. Just building up that catalog. I'm curious about your thoughts on medium. So I I'm a photographer, so I'm somewhat comfortable in Photoshop. I'm probably less comfortable than I'd like to admit publicly. But I get the job done.
Hmm.
Uh, I know a lot of illustrators use Photoshop to illustrate. I've never tried that beyond very very basic things. I do most of my drawing. Like I said, like a black crayon is my tool of choice. I really enjoy the black crayon. Um, does it matter what you're practicing with, especially at my stage, like being super basic? And I guess what is a good path for experimenting with different medium, or is it just do what makes you happy?
Yeah, and that again comes down to what your goal is
Yeah.
or what your
Yeah.
goals are. Professional illustration, you need. I mean, medium really matters. You need to
Yep.
find a medium that works for commercial illustration. You need to know how to digitize that because everything ends up digital. And you need to like it. You need to feel comfortable in it and feel like it does whatever it is you're trying to do well. For me, that's
Yeah.
Photoshop. A lot of people ask me why I illustrate in Photoshop and not in Illustrator, because Illustrator is called Illustrator and Photoshop's
Yeah.
called Photoshop. And I do have a video answer for that, and I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. But for people who, for you, like in your case, where you're just more interested in, I think it's actually more about manual skill. I should say, it's more about what comes directly out of your hand.
Mm.
If you want to learn techniques that are basically filters for what you can do, so there's what you can do just with a pencil and paper. That's like your raw, unfiltered drawing style.
Yeah.
When you want to go beyond that, then I guess it's really just, if you don't know what you want, you have to just try different things,
Yeah.
right? Maybe try more physical media. Try looking into painting with watercolor or gouache, which can be really fun to work with. Also a little bit like of a learning curve, but like everything else, everything's a learning curve.
Everything
If
is. Yeah.
if you if you like the idea of working digitally, I think one of the lowest bars you can enter past or whatever would be Procreate.
Hmm. Yeah.
If you have an iPad and an Apple
Yeah.
Pencil,
Yeah.
Procreate's like $13 or something like that, one time purchase, no subscription
Awesome.
necessary. It's super powerful. People use it professionally as their only illustration tool. There's
Cool.
tons of brushes you can get for it. It's infinite. Like, it's a really
Yeah.
good program. I'd say start with that. If you're proficient in Photoshop from a photography standpoint, that puts you ahead a lot in terms of some tricks you'll be able to do and techniques and working with
Hmm.
layers, even using
Yep.
some color adjustment layers and stuff like that.
Yep.
Uh, if you have an iPad, you can use that as a graphics tablet. for your Mac. So if you
Yep.
have Sidecar, you can do that. But to answer your question, medium matters, and the extent to which it matters really depends on what your goals are.
Yeah, I love it. That's super helpful. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I feel like I've got some good takeaways here and some good directions to pursue. I definitely want to check out your Skillshare class because it does feel like it's right on topic for me. I'm curious about your thoughts as I guess maybe the intersection of this conversation as well as as a parent and fostering developing illustration and drawing skills in kids. You've spoken a little bit already about what you've done with your girls. Yeah, and I just think about I'd like to draw with my son. I think it's really fun. Don't know how much he'd be. I mean, I would love to like watch your course with him. I kind of think that he probably wouldn't be interested, but I might be able to take some learnings and then work on them together with him or something like that. But I'm curious if you have any other thoughts about how to foster and develop skills like that in kids.
Yeah. It depends on your kid's age. I do hear some people go through my classes with their kids, but they tend to be like tweens and teenagers.
Yeah.
And even then, they're so commercially oriented that, like, I think it depends. I really, yeah, definitely younger kids probably won't get a lot from my classes. In terms of fostering that kind of creativity with your kids, the thing that I actually don't know. I don't like. I feel like as someone who does this for a living, I'm supposed to have super creative children and always be drawing with them. To be honest, my work is so much my work that I find it hard to do it with my kids.
Yeah. Totally.
Like I enjoy just letting loose. I don't really illustrate with my kids because as soon as that happens, work time comes in. And I actually get very anxious because nothing like it's not a very shareable process for me when I'm doing stuff. I do take the time to teach my kids skills, and like I right now I have my oldest on iPad on Procreate, and I'm teaching her some steps that go into illustrating for a book because she wrote a book and she wants to illustrate it. So she's asking the question, she's ready for me to give you the answer. So in that sense, like I don't really, it doesn't work for me to impose on them some creative goal to work toward. Like they seem to, I just believe that when they're ready for it, they're exposed to it. They see it all around. They'll
pick it up.
They'll listen when they're ready, like that sort of meaty, like more skilled stuff. Otherwise, I just have fun. Like my youngest likes to draw cat towers with me. That's like worlds of like basically like fantastical cat house worlds where like there's slides and pools and like no dogs allowed signs and stuff like that. And we just doodle. I draw terribly. My kids don't think I'm a good drawer. Every now and then I check in with them like I'll draw something real sick, like, I could draw this. They're like, what? So like I just I try and have fun with them. One thing that I try to do is I don't critique their art. Like when they draw stuff, if they have a goal and it comes down to needing direction, then I direct them and I'll give them critique because they're asking for it. But otherwise, like when they're drawing what they're drawing. Like I'm trying to remember exactly what it, like, I think especially when they were younger. Oh yeah, when they were younger and they're drawing things that you're not quite sure what it is. Going and being like, saying like, oh, is that maybe they drew a cat, but you thought it was a penguin. And you're like, oh, is that a penguin? Like you really want to be careful not to like go in and make them feel like they're doing something wrong. Like you always just, it's hard to explain, but I just, I'm going to let the thought go. But
Yeah.
You want to I think the joy of creativity can be delicate, and you want to just let be what it is for as long as it can, and then when they're asking questions, that's when I kind of go in and probably like feel free to actually do more direction and guidance. My kids are, I don't know about your kids, but especially my oldest is so against like being told how to do things.
Totally.
It's like she gets very frustrated about not being able to do things, and I'll say I know how to help you, but she'll still reject my help. Like, yeah, she was trying to draw something a few weeks ago, and she was trying to like get, it was supposed to be very geometric, and it was a cross, and she was trying to draw a cross, and there was some kind of complex geometric like angles and stuff like that, and she was getting really mad because her like it wasn't lining up at all, and it was wobbly, and I was like, well, let's get a ruler and let's first sketch in our light pencil lines. For her, like that was a huge, like she got it then, but a year ago that wouldn't have happened. Like where she's willing to listen to me, like say, let's put down light sketch lines. We're gonna use a ruler, make sure all of the angles are right, and now we're gonna go over with our Sharpie. That's when we go in with the Sharpie. Once we have our man, this is the longest answer to your question. I guess creativity in kids is really it's its own thing. You just want to give it as much breathing room as possible and not set up goals or like invalidate what they're trying to do. Yeah,
totally. Yeah. I think that's a fantastic response, and it's like you don't choose for them what you want, how you want them to draw, what you want them to draw. Like you just make the space so that they can find their own way. And I think that's a fantastic response. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there anything else that I should, I guess anything else any other questions I should be asking that I'm not
It's
asking?
funny. It's like the opposite interview here.
Yeah.
Well, I actually just wanted to I thought that was a great closing question, just like bringing kids and like how to nurture that. And yeah, I feel like I kind of gave you a very long-winded answer, but it's in there somewhere. But yeah, I did want to give you a chance just to, if there's anything as my guest here, that you wanted to, direct our viewers to or share that you're excited about.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think, for anyone listening who's enjoyed this conversation, if you want to hear more from Tom and I think it'd be great to link up to the episode on the podcast on the Meaning Movement podcast. That would be really fun to have people listen in, and if anyone likes podcasts, I'd be honored to be in your podcast catcher, whatever podcast catcher you use. It's the Meaning Movement podcast. But beyond that, this has been just super super fun, Tom. Really appreciate you letting me pick your brain and give me some really good directions to continue my drawing pursuits.
Yeah, no, you asked really perfect questions for someone at the stage where they're just starting to think about it, and this particular stage that you're at is probably closest to my heart in terms of when I'm writing, when I'm doing videos. I always think about those people starting just at zero, where they know about illustration and they don't know where to take it next. So I loved your questions. I do think it's actually worth just acknowledging the fact that your whole thing, we're helping people find their calling or just finding that perfect match of what they do for a living and how that lines up to what they're passionate about. Obviously, in my world, I'm encountering people going through that all the time. Like people, a lot of my audience are either career transitioners, people who are, lawyers, they were biochemists, they were, whatever. And now, or they've just been putting things on hold for a while they were parenting. And now they're ready to follow their passion and dream. So I did want to just open up before we say goodbye, just a little space for you to maybe speak to that. Cause I think that's a really cool overlap between the audience that I have, that a lot of people are in that
Yeah.
stage, and
Cool.
then what you maybe can help people with.
Yeah, I love that. What a great invitation. Thank you for that. I didn't yeah, even connect those dots that a lot of people would be, kind of following your guidance, that are in those spaces. Um, I think there's so much to say. I guess, one thing is just, if you're looking at a transition, I think that often people, we feel these transitions coming before we really even know what they are, but that there's like this stirring, or like maybe it's a dissatisfaction, or maybe it's just a desire for some change. Like, if that's a space you're in, that's very much the space that I like to play in, and help people with. I think it's really important to pay attention to your yeah, to what's coming up, the desires that you have, and the curiosities along the way. I think along with that, when I was first starting to pursue these ideas, I did a master's degree in theology and psychology, and questions of formation, like how do we become the people we are, and how do we make meaning. I had a conversation with one of my professors about, like, how do we start the process, and he was like, this is how he teaches, but he was like, well, I would start by asking you, what's your favorite smell? And I was like,
Hmm.
uh I think I said, like, lavender. I love lavender. It's really relaxing. But then, like, he went on to make the point that, like, you have to start with, like, understanding what you love,
Hmm.
what brings you life, and then start from there. I mean, still, it's a very very broad category, but like sometimes we're in these places where we're so close to uh, paying the bills, and doing the work, and looking at jobs, and um all of the questions like that are kind of the other end of the road. I think what's really great about people who would be following your work, and exploring creatively, is that, like, along with that comes a sense of, like, it has to have some joy in it. It has to have some of your desire, some of a space to, like, acknowledge, like, yeah, I love making things, and that's a really important thread, to start with. It's not
Hmm.
the whole picture of where this transition should lead you, but it's one important thread. I think that's a good analogy, that is a piece of the
Totally.
tapestry, or whatever it might be. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of what came to mind related to that. But would love to connect further with anyone who wants to continue to explore those transitions, and if you're
Yeah.
thinking about making those kinds of transitions.
Where can they find you?
At themeaningmovement.com, themeaningmovement.com, you can find my work there. It'd be great. Yeah, great to connect.
Awesome, Dan. Yeah, thank you so much for being a part of this channel, and I loved our conversation today. I actually want to keep going, but I know we gotta do the
Yeah.
rest of our. You have a lot of hats to wear today, so I'm gonna let you go wear those hats. All right, thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciated having you on the channel. You're a great asker of questions, and of course, great with the microphone. And my audience is really going to appreciate your journey and those questions that you ask, kind of on their behalf. And of course, guys, Dan's totally in the space of helping people in the transition between maybe a career they don't like and moving into something that is more personally meaningful to them. One thing I really encourage you guys to go and check out is Dan's free course called 5 Clues to Your Calling. Go check that out. I have a link in the show notes. If you do end up getting in touch with Dan, please just let him know that you found him here in this conversation. I think we'd both appreciate that. So you know the deal, guys. Keep asking great questions and keep working them out in your work. I'll see you in the next video.